I want to thank those people and everybody else that showed up. If you were and you did show up, please ask you to stand if you can. And we would like to thank you officially. Thank you. Anyway, Johnnie. Tarek, I want to say thank you too. It was because of you that a lot of that transpired. So I want to take some time and thank you as well.
Oh, there we are. Okay, so we still have to go down the line, and then we have a statement for you, Brian. I know you're going to read out for us, sitting there waiting patiently. In fact, we're just going to pass the microphone away from you and keep going. My name's Johnnie Aseron. I was the Wellness Initiative and Interfaith Coordinator for Chet Cohen Camp. And I, too, would like to appreciate all the veterans who arrived at the camp and really did help out, except for setting up the military tents. You guys were great. They just kept referring me to the instruction manual, which for some reason was translated from a foreign country. I don't know. Anyway, we'll go down and keep introducing ourselves, and then I know when it gets to you, Brian, you can relay the messages and the statement you have to read too.
Oh, yat shik doshitine. That means all the goodness from the cosmos to you here in this moment. My kin, shik. I view you as my kin, my aunties, my uncles, my grandmas, my grandpas, my sisters, my brothers, my nieces, nephews. In Dene culture, we see each other as kin. It's the only way it's going to work out here on this earth, if we see each other as family. I'm a Black Charcoal Streak division of the Red Running into the Water people of the Dene Nation, also known as Navajo, but we prefer Dene because that's the real word. My father's mother is Cheyenne clan. My mother's father is the Salt clan. Scandinavian My father's father is Scandinavian clan. Taos, New Mexico. I grew up in Taos, New Mexico. Beidil Dasanil Sharan. Where the bell tower is where I live now, which is also known as Albuquerque, New Mexico. In this manner, I present myself as a Dene woman. I'm happy to sit amongst these fine gentlemen and to participate with them in the ongoing struggle, not just for Standing Rock, but all indigenous lands that are being assaulted right now. And I'm honored as a Dene woman that the Lakota people would allow me to stand behind them and allow me to put my feet on their ancestral lands and to try my best to serve in what little ways I can. And at Standing Rock, I was helping to get a lot of the messaging out, the media, maintain a focus on nonviolence and encourage others not to bring their weapons, because some of my family members and others really wanted to bring their weapons. So we had to really make that clear. Also helped with a few other things that I'll talk about later on, but just very honored to be here. And thank you, Veterans for Peace, for letting us be here. You guys are my heroes. You know, you give me so much hope, and the way that you bring that message of peace back home from the battlefield and continue to fight in a different kind of battle here. It just is probably the coolest thing I've ever seen. So thank you guys so much for all you do, and I'm honored to be a part of this convention. Yeah.
I want to thank Johnnie and thank Lyla and the rest of the panel. My name is Brian Trautman. I'm the treasurer with Veterans for Peace. And I'm here to read an opening statement from Four Arrows. Four Arrows is a college professor, an American Indian rights activist, prolific writer, author of many books. Unfortunately, Four Arrows couldn't join us, and due to our Wi-Fi situation, also was unable to Skype in as planned. Plan C was for me to read his opening remarks. And I should add that I was at the Oceti Cohen camp in October for about 8 days, along with Tarek Kauf, Will Griffin, Matt Ho, and others. And Ellen Davidson, yes, and others. Okay, again, these are the remarks that Four Arrows had prepared to read at this mini plenary. Buffy Sainte-Marie, the famous Cree singer and songwriter, introduced her song, The Universal Soldier, during My War in the 1960s. With wisdom, courage, and her beautiful voice, she sings, "You're the one who gives his body as a weapon of the war, and without you, all this killing can't go on." People who join Veterans for Peace understand this problem, many like me having learned it in hindsight, unfortunately. Not all returning veterans agree with the VFP perspective, but I venture to say that all returning American Indian vets do. They still rightly maintain love and empathy for those who made and continue to make this mistake, but more and more are not encouraging youth to enlist, although there are still many incentives for young people to do so. The old vets know well the conflict between traditional spiritual and community values and the military emphasis on aggression and killing on behalf of corporate greed. They know the military experience is likely to lead to disillusionment. Still, despite this realization of American Indian veterans, and despite decades of genocide and forced removal from their ancestral homelands, American Indians, young Native men and women, continue to serve in numbers that belie our small percentage of the American population. Youthful optimism, ignorance, or a desire to escape poverty, to embrace a warrior's initiation, and a belief one is truly defending the homeland are all responsible. Somehow, young people do not make the connections when they see the consequences of PTSD suffered by their elders who have returned from wars. According to the Matsunaga study, after the Vietnam War, American Indian veterans suffered from PTSD twice as often and more severely than white Americans. Perhaps the young ones do not make the connection because American Indian and Alaska Native children experience PTSD at the same rate as veterans of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, as reported in 2014 by the Department of Justice. As a former officer in the United States Marines, I sadly sent off several young Oglala Lakota Marines when I lived and worked on the Pine Ridge Reservation. Although I had mixed emotions, I could not reject the requests to do so. Recruiters promised youth they could return for ceremonies when stateside, but broke their promises and forced recruits to go AWOL. Later, when I was asked by Rick Two Dogs to raise the 4 American flags around the Sundance Arbor for a forthcoming Sundance, I shared my mixed emotions with him, and after he consulted with the spirits, he had us raise the flags upside down. We still hold the flag properly and still give it to the widowers of veterans respectfully. But more and more of us know that the U.S. wars, whether against countries, people, or nature, generally stem from the same misguided worldview. And as Standing Rock and many other stands around the world by indigenous people in efforts to protect homelands have shown the world, when the indigenous veteran faces the enemies of future generations, the same traits that earned battle decorations in wars are operating. The more all of us can join in with them, the better. Thank you, VFP, for your having recognized this. Sincerely, for Arrows, co-founder of Chapter 100, with Tony Van Renterheim and Bud Day in northern Arizona. Thank you.
I think the first question was, what were some of the more memorable things that come to mind? Remy?
I think one of the things that really stuck out for me was in the midst of all the violence, in the midst of, you know, the brutality of a militarized police state, was the ability to have a sense of humor. As indigenous people, I think that's very important. You know, that can be classified in English terms as gallows humor, but to laugh in the face of the enemy, despite the impending violence, is something that really resonated with me. And I think some of you that may have been on the front lines other places know what that's about. And, you know, that's a part of our history in the sense of, you know, interacting with military on our land. And such is the case in many occasions. Bridge 134 was one of them. And we'll get a little bit more into that, but just the ability to kind of have our inside jokes and to be on the front line. And, you know, I think that was for me the part of, you know, the family and the relatives that we came to know, the friends that we came to know as well. So I think for me was having that sense of humor.
Oh, it's a good one. I think for those of you, as you see, we have images that will run behind us as we're speaking. And they just run the gamut of the things that were there. And one of the interesting ones is that when you go, you just leave Standing Rock and cross the river, and then you're into the area that became Chetishakwin Camp. 1851 treaty ground where our nations gathered for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. But that area is significant because the water runs, first you cross the water, then it runs behind you, and then it comes back. And there's kind of a bowl there, where the hill that the highway is on is higher. There's ridgeline and mountains around you, and the winds thus can change direction very easily. So you might get a southerly, you might get an easterly, you might get a westerly, and in winter you don't want that northerly. But those are the things that happen. So like Remy was saying, I'm just thinking of some funny things. There were days when, you know, you guys all know this stuff. 14 hours later, 16 hours later, you're still on your feet, and you're trying to figure out, you know, some things you might do. And there was a late evening call for action because it looked like there would be a breach to the north blockade, which was originally put up by them, not by us. And that looked like they were going to breach their own gate, or I don't know what was going on there. They're all stacked up, and a bunch of people went up in a prayer, and everybody was standing there, and there was a lot of tension, and the lights came on, and for some reason, some of those guys decided on the other side they'd pop smoke, and then that they would send out tear gas. But all of us felt really good because we'd been in camp all day, and we knew that the wind was at our backs. So they all threw out their canisters, and we all stood there, and all the smoke went straight back into their faces.
Yeah, it's really hard not to laugh at certain things like that. I remember the day that they were pushing everyone out. They had a few police chasing after people, And there was this one guy with a big long shovel like running away from the police, and he got across the river because he had been down it so many times, but the police, they didn't know the snow was so deep, so they just went whoop-boom, 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 whoop. And I was like, oh, don't laugh, Lyla, don't laugh. Oh. And the guy with the shovel just got away. Oh, man. Okay, wow, there's a lot of good memories. I think one of the big ones was when we had 500 Christians come into camp, and that triggered a lot of natives because we just have been through a lot with Christians. But it was still wonderful because all of these Christians got together and burned the Doctrine of Discovery, which was issued by Pope Alexander in 1493, which said that anyone who wasn't Christian, you could kill them if they wouldn't convert and take their lands. And that's a papal bull. It's still in effect, has never been rescinded. And all these Christian denominations came and burned it in our sacred fire. You know, things like that, where it seemed like Standing Rock wasn't just fighting a pipeline. We were healing so many old wounds, and we were redefining who and what we were as two-leggeds in this time on a continent that has been riddled with division and fear. And so many alliances happened that I think we'd all been yearning for so long, including the alliance between veterans and natives, you know, because for so long the U.S. government army has been our enemy. They've done horrific things to communities, and then to have all these veterans come and stand behind us was quite special. Also, I think the women's prayer march, it was led by women. You know, they went to the bridge, and it was silent, and it was quite profound, just the grace with which they led that prayer. And they were all very scared, but they knew they had to go. And I liked it because the men were letting the women lead, and that's a big healing too, because as a Dene woman, you know, we're a matrifocal society, and our women were always the leaders, and always took care of the corn, and always were the ones that were the decision makers. And today in our Navajo Tribal Council, every single delegate is a male, except for one woman, Amber Crotty. And so part of colonization is the destruction of women's leadership. And so that restoration of women's leadership was a way of decolonizing, I feel. And a lot of that was going on at Standing Rock. A lot of talk about how do we honor women's leadership once again the way we used to. And another big event for me was the Forgiveness March. This was right after October 27th, which was a huge, very sad day. A lot of people were shot with rubber bullets. A lot of people were maced. A lot of people were tased. 2 of my brothers were arrested that day, put in dog kennels, all charged with all these crazy felonies that were totally bogus. And that was one of the days when I think a lot of fear, a huge injection of fear, swept through the camp, when just weeks before it was more of a lighthearted area. All of a sudden it felt like a genuine war zone. And the amount of fear was also mixed with hatred for the policemen and the puppet masters who run them. And there was so much pain to behold of how many people were coughing up blood because they were shot with a rubber bullet, or people who had even lost limbs and things. And so we called together a forgiveness walk from Mandan Legion Park to the Morton County Police Station. And the reason of forgiveness was not so much for the police as it was for ourselves, because we knew that we could not fight with a clear mind if there was hatred in our hearts. And so we knew we had to lay down our hatred. We knew we had to lay down our anger against these forces so that we could come back to camp and fight with a clear spirit and a clear mind. And as John Trudell has said, that we must act for the love of our people and of our land. We must not react out of hatred for those who have no sense. And I think he sums it up very well there, that we wanted to act out of love for our people and our land, not react out of hatred for those who have no sense and waste our emotions on those things. So anyways, we're pretty scared. This Rosebud Sichangu Lakota elder and I were leading the forgiveness walk, and we were pretty scared, not only of the police, but also of our own people, that we would appear to be insane. But we went ahead and did it anyways, because the elder said, "Wo akik tonje, wo akik tonje. She said, "This is the spirit you need now, spirit of forgiveness that invites forgiveness." And so we went ahead anyways, and to our surprise, about 1,000 people came on the walk, and we encircled the whole police station, the law offices, and various the jails where Red Fawn was sitting and others, and we committed forgiveness to that whole strange thing called the Morton County Police Station. And we laid down a lot of fear and laid down a lot of hatred and anger, and we relieved ourselves of a lot of things. And we showed them who we were and what we stood for. We showed them what was in our spirits and what was in our hearts. And then we went back to camp and started strategizing again. And so that was a big moment for me too. But anyways, I'll stop there, and yeah.
Oh, thank you. For me, I was in camp for 7 months, so I've got a virtual plethora of memories. One that stood out, though, was as winter was setting in, we were getting a lot of assistance and a lot of people supporting us, and a lot of supplies coming into camp. And as the media team, we were kind of following what was going on on the Morton County website. And we found one day on their Facebook page that because of this police action, which wasn't anticipated and they hadn't budgeted for, they didn't have some key pieces of equipment, and they put out a call for hand warmers and gloves and hats. So we went to our donations tent in camp, and we gathered up all the items on the list, and a group of warriors took it up to Morton County and delivered it, and as a gesture. That was just after the governor had expressed extreme concern over the cold weather and our health and well-being. And we had to remind them that as Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota people, we were kind of familiar with the winters in North Dakota already. And we were actually doing pretty good down there. But one of the things that the camps have closed and I've had some time to reflect, is the difference of warrior culture in Lakota ways as opposed to like mainstream society. When I was a young man, I had a certain perspective of what warriors stood for and who they were. Warriors fought. Warriors held weapons. They had certain skill sets. And then in camp, I learned things like a phrase, akichita. Kichita were a society of warriors for the Lakotas. They were literally the protectors of the people. And I became familiar with the security in camp, and we had a small group of people that I would call our Kichitas, the protectors of our people. Remy was one of the key security people. But the difference of a warrior is not just someone who fights. A warrior is someone who protects, was a key difference for me. And I think I may have grown a little bit in that understanding. And I'm very grateful. There were so many powerfully strong people in camp, much more so than me. The security people, the water protectors that stood out on the bridge, backwater bridge on November 20th. Break your heart to see that footage or to have been there. And what they endured and what we all endured was unfortunate, but it also, I think, brought us together in a very powerful way. Remy, thoughts? Next question. One of the most positive things coming out of camp for you now, that there's been some time.
I think one of the most positive things for me personally was the fact that, this snippet, if you looked at this time, the camp, over a year for some of us. I was there almost 8 months along with my collective member, Desiree. Just during that time, people, if you look closely enough, this was a reflection of this country's history. And being able to use military knowledge along with, myself being a direct action trainer, to put these two worlds together and to be able to step inside of history and say, no, not today, not here, not now. And to be effective in that way, to use the knowledge of the state that is oppressing you against it. And we did that with the help of a lot of indigenous veterans who were there. I know people talk about when the veterans came, as us, as people here, as indigenous people, we're veterans, all of us. We've survived many, many wars. And, in terms of PTSD and things like that, people throw that around. For indigenous people, I feel like there is no post-traumatic anything. It's ongoing. We still have to, not see ourselves in certain holidays. We have to fight to tell people about the real history. And the people that came out understood that. And I wanted to thank them for their help in those moments as well. Because as indigenous people, going up against a far superior, technologically advanced enemy is something that we've been doing for a while. And most of the times during the front lines, all we had was wood. That's it. We had wood. We use it in various ways, like we did way back when, for spiritual fires, for prayers, for bows, for arrows, things like that. And that's what we used. We didn't use weapons. We were armed with our prayers. And we stood there in spiritual resistance on our own land and said no to history repeating itself. And so I think that was something for me that was very special and very important. And so having the ability to use this knowledge that, I sacrificed, myself for, signed up, and if I have to be honest, maybe like some of y'all, we were used for corporate interests in other countries. When people come up to me and they say, oh, thank you for your service. That doesn't resonate with me. Service is something that you get from a car repair person. So to me, it's, I always take issue when people say, oh, you serve. Well, thank you for your service. We're still serving as indigenous people. We're still having to fight. And so to be able to use this knowledge against the very system that's oppressing us and have success after success happen was beautiful. Because as indigenous people, we don't have a lot of victories, but when we do have them, we celebrate them. And there was a lot of celebration going on. And there will be a lot of celebration continuing from here, because there's other pipelines, there's other extractive industries that are out there that we're gonna have to fight. And we hope to see you along with, with us. And so I think that's something that I can say.
A couple of things that are going through my mind watching the convention that you're having, looking at your booklet of all the things you're describing that you're attempting to do. That's a lot of fronts. And I appreciate, to a certain or lesser degree, what the organization is for that and what it means for us to be available. So if there's one thing, I guess, that I would mention is extraordinary, was that in fact, we learned something extraordinary, that we can do things together, even when we're arriving in the middle of the night. I used to have the meetings in the mornings, and it didn't take very long to start asking, can everybody who's just arrived in camp, can I get a show of hands of how many? And sometimes there were, out of the room of 500-600, there were 489 people who just arrived and had to start from the beginning, and assumed someone will start from the beginning and tell me everything, even though for 3 months we'd already been doing that. And out of that arose some organic processes of how we could do things together. So for example, as Remy's been saying, as Lyla's been saying, actually there were non-Indian people and some vets, I think, involved as well, that started a morning after meeting from the camp one called Decolonizing Conversations Anonymous. And they actually recruited quite heavily during the meetings that were going on for the camp, so that people actually did get to move out of space and get some challenge and go and look. I think there was a couple of other groups that started as well, so that in an organic process, as all these people kept arriving, things kept also developing that allowed space for those who had just arrived. And the phenomenal part about it, or the extraordinary part, is that at one stage, as Lyla was describing, we were working on interfaith events. So there were actually 1,000 long robes, as we like to call them, on the ground. And there were 2,000 vets arriving the next day. By the way, where do you guys get your buses from? Because you got to talk to those people. Because there must have been like 10 or 11 vets buses that had to go and get towed or had broken down. Guys getting off the bus going, oh, I didn't know it was winter. I was, yeah, it's winter up here. That's right. In fact, I joke, but there were 2,000 vets, 1,000 long robes, and a whole bunch of other people arriving in the camp, of where we were already at about probably 6,000 to 8,000 at that time, and no spaces, not time enough to put up enough for everybody. And yet, the next day, everyone had been fed, everyone had a place to sleep, albeit with 17 other people in a minibus, but anyway. Everything happened. And so for me, I look at that anything is possible. That for the veterans who were there, and for those of you who assisted on the side, for those of you who have come up to me and all of us and said, we wished we had been there, but we watched every day, or we were supportive, the foundation by which those things happened still stayed strong enough for us to find the way to help it to work and to make it work, even though on a daily basis we were dealing with thousands and thousands. Some stages there were 10 to 12,000 at one time in the camp. That's a lot of people. You can see the photos as they play behind you when you see the camp shots. That's a lot of people. In fact, in the early days, you never knew. On the weekends, there would be 3,000 to 4,000 extra people, because they only had weekends. Weekend warriors, they became known as. And on the weekdays, it would go away. And a come out my tent on Monday, and the place looked empty, and we go back to doing things. And then on Friday, I'd get out of my tent, and there were 17,000 tents somewhere that hadn't been there the weekend before, with a lot of people poking their heads out, hoping someone was going to come by and explain to them what was going on. So to me, that's extraordinary, because along with, again, we're in this platform of your convention, that the foundation somehow was strong enough to say, well, we got to try and do these things together, and we'll help each other out. And I got to say, a lot of people did just that. The courage you saw of people who did give service, even though they didn't work on my car, Remy, because it was broken down half the time. You just saw them, without question, haul water, chop wood, go and see if they could help someone, go to the kitchens, go to any of the areas that we needed, and also get involved then, as well as it built towards more and more and more confrontational and push towards violent actions, even though we were in nonviolent peace camp. It just happened, and I don't know that it'll ever happen again, and I suppose it can't in that manner. And for each person that maybe only had 2 days, or for those who were there for 11 months, the fact is it took every single person. It was an extraordinary, unique circumstance that, you know, I can look at these photos too and see, oh, not that photo though. Oh, what kind of timing is that? Gee whiz. Yeah, it's Jackson Brown and Bonnie Raitt, correct. I just think to myself, that to me is the thing. I saw it happen. I was there, and those of you who were there as well. I saw it happen. I never knew. And for those of us who came and saw, we never knew. Each sunrise, if you stood up on what became known as Facebook Hill, you guys all know that were there. Yeah, everybody that wasn't there, the phone signal there was pretty poor, so there was one space where the new God was made manifest. And we're talking how many? Hundreds up there. There's lots of photos. Went to foreign countries where they don't speak English. They're going, what the heck are they doing? Anyway, to see that opportunity and to see it happen is something that goes inside your heart.
Thank you, brothers. There is a lot of really wonderful, incredible repercussions from Standing Rock. So many that I don't think anyone in the world even knows what they all are. But I know of a few. Number one is the recentering of prayer in our movements. In decades past, praying at a movement wasn't always seen as normal or seen as a good thing to do, but our ancestors were prayerful people, and we tried to make every step a prayer. We tried to make every breath a prayer. We tried to make our life a prayer. And by that, I mean we tried to communicate with the unseen world at all times, because there are many battles to fight out there, and you can fight them alone, or you can fight them with your ancestors behind you. And that goes for each and every one of us. And so to have that movement very strongly, having so many ancestors present because of our prayers, and now that's trickling out into other movements, and we're praying first before we give our panel. This is something that I think we've sorely needed. Another thing is a revamping of the value of nonviolence. I think during past movements, we have wavered from that at times, and understandably so. It's very hard to remain nonviolent. It takes more courage to remain nonviolent, more tenacity, and more conviction within oneself about who you are and what you stand for. And so I don't judge or blame past movements, particularly Native American movements that have wavered from the path of nonviolence, but Standing Rock did bring that value front and center again. And it helped us to remember that this is a very effective strategy. And we might not have achieved our end goal yet, although there is possibilities with this new federal ruling that says indeed the pipeline is illegal. But at the same time, our elders said what is important is not so much the outcome as the process by which you fight. That is a very important thing. And I know that some of my contemporaries disagree with me on that, and they kind of prefer the by any means necessary strategy. But the fact that we remained true to our commitment to nonviolence throughout that movement, when there was so many temptations to pick up that weapon and shoot back, to watch your women get hurt in front of you. I know our men were just freaking out, and they're consumed with fear and hardship. And so that was very beautiful. And I think, inspired the rest of the movements to consider nonviolence as an option, and to consider the fact that this can amplify your movement and make it stronger than resorting to counter-violence. Another wonderful repercussion of Standing Rock is that people looked at Standing Rock, they saw the egregiousness of it, they saw how atrocious this company was, and how atrocious it was that the state was backing them, and that the police force was backing them. And then they had to say, oh wait, that's going on in my backyard right now, because Standing Rock is everywhere. Right now in my homeland, we have a fracking boom occurring on our eastern agency. There's a fracking well every 0.6 miles. It looks like the earth has measles. Our women are being abused by the man camps, the imported workers who come. Our water is being destroyed on a daily basis. It's actually dangerous to live there because of all the methane in the air and all the gas you breathe in on a daily basis. That's no different from Standing Rock. We look also at what's happening in Louisiana, what's happening in Florida, what's happening in Montana. And so a wonderful repercussion of Standing Rock was that people are starting to see, if that's not right, then maybe what's going on in my backyard is not right either. And there's lots of support for indigenous groups bubbling up right now. And lots of people scratching their heads saying, wow, how can I decolonize myself in my hometown all around the country? So that's another very, very important, wonderful repercussion. I'd say a fourth repercussion of Standing Rock that is happening today is the fact that, you know, he was saying we had thousands of people come, thousands and thousands and thousands of people come, and almost everyone I talked to had this really profound experience there, where they got to be a part of a real prayer, where they got to see the heart of a people who aren't there for money, who aren't there for fame, although as Remy said, sometimes they were. But a lot of people weren't. A lot of people were there because they believed in Unchimaka, they believed in the sanctity of the earth, and they believed that we could do something to protect it. And for them to see that impacted them. And when they went home, they started doing more things. And even my own family, my own brother, you know, to watch him come back to life when he was almost dead, you know, on drugs and alcohol, to watch him go there and have that fire reignited in his heart, that, wow, maybe there's a reason worth living. Maybe there's something worth fighting for. You know, Standing Rock helped my family in that way because it brought my brother back to life. It brought so many warriors back to life, not just Native American warriors, but European American warriors, African American warriors, and Asian American warriors. The whole gamut, we were all there, and we were all brought back to life. We remembered there's something worth fighting for. So those are some pretty big repercussions if you ask me, and I personally still think that even though we didn't stop the oil from flowing, although we might still, we still had a victory on that land, a huge victory for Mother Earth and for the people.
back. Oh, thank you, sister. Those are powerful words. For me, on a personal note, I have spent most of my life trying to explain where Standing Rock Reservation was. When people asked where I was from, I'd say I'm from Standing Rock. They'd go, "Where's that?" And I'd say, "Well, it's this little reservation up in North Dakota on the Missouri River." And now the name of my tribe has become iconic. And in a really good way, because now it stands for something I think that is going to lead to some positive things and some good things in legacy. One of the things that happened in camp a lot that we talked about was what we called camp magic. And it was just a matter of asking for something and it would appear. So if you came into camp and you needed a hammer to pound some steaks, you kind of just stood there and said, "I need a hammer." And you turn around and there was somebody standing there with a hammer. I swear to God. And not only were they standing there with a hammer, they said, "What can I hammer for you?" And the way that the people came together, and it didn't matter where you were from, what tribe you were from, or what city, or what neighborhood you were from, there was an unspoken brotherhood and sisterhood in camp. We were all there for a singular reason. One of the struggles I think we're going to have moving forward now is our enemy was one thing in camp, Dapple. That was it. And we were all focused on that fight. And now we're all scattered. In the last weeks before camp closed, there was a lot of folks talking about what we were going to do. And a lot of folks really sad. And a lot of folks really depressed because it looked like we were losing. And I heard an elder at the sacred fire one day he pointed at that fire, and he said, "If you think that this fire going out is the end, then you learned nothing here. You learned nothing. The fire, the sacred fire is in here." And I repeated that story to many, many fellow water protectors who were hurting, and it helped a little. And so this is brothers and sisters getting together again. I mean, every time we see each other at these gatherings, it's an amazing thing to see someone from camp. And we've been sitting out in the lobby laughing all morning, telling stories, as I'm sure many veterans do. We were going to open it up here for questions and answers. A little bit of Q&A time, I guess. Matt, if you want to grab the mic. Is there any? Okay. I'll delay that for just a minute. Remy wanted to go through a couple of things.
Again, my name's Remy. I just want to say thank you for inviting me here. Member of VFP as well. And just wanted to talk about a few things in terms of the direct actions and the military knowledge. I spoke about that earlier. There was 3 instances where this actually played out, and we had an overwhelming success. My collective is called the Indian Problem, and we're a direct action collective. A little bit different than maybe some of the politics that's here. We say direct action because in terms of nonviolence, we feel as indigenous people only works if your oppressor has a conscience. And the American military, police forces, they have none. And I think you can see that play out in other countries, other indigenous villages around the world. And you can go into the inner cities and probably see the same thing. And so this right here was Bridge 134. This is a spiritual standoff where we had maybe 3 to 4 indigenous veterans that helped organize over 30 water protectors to make a standoff on a bridge where there was militarized police and all of their battle tanks and armor and weapons. We made a stand, and we did that in spiritual resistance through prayer. And we were able to hold off those militarized police for over 7 hours. And that was the day that most of y'all saw camp being raided on the 27th of October. Most of those images you saw, but what you didn't see was indigenous veterans making this stand. And none of these pictures will ever do justice, because they were coming in buses and they were filing out in gear ready to brutalize us. And we were just praying. You know, we had a sacred fire. We were in ceremony. But to look at this picture and these pictures here, you know, our friends that are on the front lines put their lives on there. We didn't know what was going to happen that day. You had veterans who were on a bridge using military tactics to hide our numbers. And if anybody knows that's done recon or anything like that, you never show the enemy your true numbers. And so we were going underneath the bridge and we'd pop out on the other side. We were never really, you know, they never knew how many that we had, but we made that stand that day. And this is just some of the folks that were there, and you can see everyone singing. And that helicopter that you see there was going on a 90-degree slant, trying to figure out how many people we had underneath that bridge. But when you see military tactics and nonviolence come together, it's very, very effective. And I look forward to many more instances beyond Standing Rock where we can employ this together. And organizing a lot of these actions, I think, is very important. This is Turtle Island. Turtle Island you may have seen in social media or may have even participated. The first time we wanted to go on Turtle Island was to just make it to the shore. That's all we wanted to do, so that we could pray. We were never meant to take that hill. We were never meant to get on top of it, because there were ancestors that were buried up there, people that had passed on before. And so all we wanted to do was make it to the shores, and you can see what we were met with. So we could pray and say, tell the ancestors that, hey, it's not always going to be like this. Those military vehicles that are driving over your graves, it's not going to be like this. Here's food, here's song, here's prayer. We know that you're disturbed, but it's not going to be like this. And that's what we were met with. And so you see how, and that was organized by indigenous veterans. We built a bridge overnight. We broke everything up into tasks, you know, points for each person. And we did that very effectively, because we showed the first time to the rest of the world what we were up against. And there were subsequent actions that tried to take that hill, but I don't think they understood the true intention of that first action itself, was to just pray and say, hey, you know, we know that you're being disturbed, but it's not always going to be like this. And so the next example was the intersectional action that indigenous veterans, along with myself, put together. We brought together Black Lives Matter. We brought together the American Indian Movement. We brought together the Brown Berets. We brought together LA Red, the PICO-based, faith-based organization. We brought together the LGBTQ community. And we went to a supply yard in Mandan and shut down their whole operation for the day. And bringing all of these groups together, I was looking at camp and I was just seeing, oh my God, there's so many of these historic social movements that are here representing, you know, what the state does not want is for us to band together. What the state does not want is for white people to use their privilege, weaponize it, so that we can go ahead and perform these ceremonies as you're seeing up here. You see white people holding the line, and above is where we held ceremony to pray for not only the workers, but the land itself, the veterans that showed up. These are just a few pictures of the veterans that came to Standing Rock, all in formation, all lined up. Some of you were there, and I want to thank you again. And so, I think what we're here to do is talk about extractive industries. Really, as indigenous people, we've been experiencing it for quite a long time. I know, as far as the history of this land, you have the slave trade. That's an extractive industry. You have Indian removals. That's an extractive industry. And so, as we've been fighting off gold, oil, the things that really destroy the land and endanger our women constantly with man camps, I think that really we need to look forward to taking these fights home to our own communities and figuring out what really ails us, because the Not One More movement, the deportation movement, that's an extractive industry. School to prison pipeline, that's an extractive industry. And so we need you, former veterans, white people, to weaponize your privilege and join us, because when we had that line of white people, it really showed the cops that we can't brutalize our own people, but they've been doing it to us for months. And so we need your help to help change this into a true collective liberation for us all, for our children, our grandchildren, and so on and so forth. And so those are just a few things that I wanted to mention.
Thank you, Remy. Spring of 2016, a small group of people gathered at the Sacred Stone camp and pitched their tents. I don't think any of them understood what was going to happen and follow that simple act of standing there and saying, no, this is not going to happen. It led to, by November, approximately 15,000 people gathered in that place. At that time, we were the 5th largest city in North Dakota. The impact of the firewood that we consumed will probably be felt in North Dakota for a couple of decades. The numbers of people, tens of thousands of people who came and stood with us. Over 300 of the federally recognized tribes in the United States came to bring their flags and to participate and pray and stand with us. Tribes from international countries came to stand with us. Tribes who have been fighting and warring for 100 years came and laid down their weapons, and brothers mended old wounds. As Johnnie said, I don't know that it'll ever happen again. I hope it does. I hope that somehow, some way, some place that we're all going to be able to gather again and have experience this kind of camaraderie and togetherness. Thank you. For myself, again, as an enrolled member of the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe, we put out the call for people to come and stand with us. And I've heard some of my elders make the statement that we are so grateful, and in my prayers and my thoughts and my fear is that we will never be able to adequately thank everybody for coming to stand with us. The camp magic, all the things that happened there were reassuring to the human spirit that people really ultimately can come together in a good way and share a space and help each other out. Go ahead. No, go ahead. I was just getting ready. For anybody who came to camp, you already know this. Johnnie Aseron was kind of our de facto mayor of camp. And one of the guys, one of the leadership that you would actually see working in camp all day long was Johnnie. And thank you, Johnnie, for all of the help and work that you did.
I secretly had a half a dozen cardboard cutouts. Parts of the camp. Where is that guy? He's over there. Okay.
He could not walk across camp without getting stopped about every 10 feet.
Thanks, John. I'm going to remember that. I've been advised that our time is rapidly coming to a close. And we know you guys have lots of things still on your agenda, so we don't want to run over. We had two last things we wanted to do. First of all, again, to thank each of you for coming and filling up this space and sharing some stories with us. And as Remy had done earlier, to acknowledge all those, first the movement for Veterans for Peace, which is like, for me, elders, because all you guys have been places I haven't been. I'd also like to remind us all to remember the young people who actually started what became Standing Rock. Yeah. Oh. You guys can stand up. You know, for all the experience that's in this room, in fact, it's beholden on those of us who have that opportunity to support and give that space for younger people, because they're going to have to deal with a lot of things coming up. So I really say that in the most honorful way. There were a lot of people trying to find and understand and make sense of, and that was the push that brought all the rest of us who could come and in a humble way try and offer our help. Last announcement is that for those who were and those who would like to come and listen, those who were at Cohen or Sacred Stone or Standing Rock, sort of informally tomorrow at 5 p.m. we will meet in the Millennium Room. They named a room. Can you name it? Leave the Millennium Room to me. Seriously. Who does that? Anyway, tomorrow at 5 p.m. For the Veterans for Peace movement and for INITC, for Remy's group, and for others, we're going to have a roundtable visit about some of those ideas, those experiences, and things that we have not had time to do in this session. So 5 p.m. we hope to see you there. And last, we would like to end this session with a song. Yeah, and so at this time, that's our ending song. And then we'll go around with the hat for the, no.
The Ochedi Shikowin Camp. It's a Lakota word that means Camp of the Seven Council Fires. And it was the first time that the Lakota, Dakota, Nakota people had gathered in over 140 years. The last time that there was an Ochedi Shikowin camp was June 25th, 1876, when a certain general made a wrong left turn out in the West and became the first white guy to wear arrow shirts. As Remy said, we don't have many victories to remember, but that one we talked about a lot in camp. So thank you all for coming, and thank you from the bottom of my heart, from my people at Standing Rock, and from all of the people that came to help out. And oh, thank you.
I think I'll stand, if that's okay. I'll come over here. Actually, some of you already heard this song at the Lincoln Memorial event we had. You happy to hear it again? All right. That's my buddy right there, Tarak. You got me here, man. Thank you. I'm glad I met you in the Prairie Nights Casino one night. There's camp magic, but there's also Prairie Nights magic. All right, let's see if I can do this. That's the sound of a drum in Chicago. It doesn't sound like that in New Mexico. All right. Indigenous people, shine your light, we are equal, yeah, yeah. I remember the days when our prayers were illegal. I remember the days when being Indian was lethal, yeah, yeah. Yeah, we had a rough past, but get ready for the sequel. Oh. Get ready for the glorious comeback of a people. Oh, yeah. Rise up, all you warriors of love, all you answers to the prayers of our ancestors from above. I can feel it in my heart. Can you feel it in your blood? I can hear the seventh fire calling us to wake up. Yeah, all nations rise. Rise up, 'cause now's your time. We don't have to hide anymore, 'cause now's our time. Yeah. All nations rise. Rise up, 'cause now's your time. We don't have to hide anymore, 'cause now's our time. With forgiveness as my bow and my prayers as my arrows, pull it back and let go. I watch them fly like sparrows. Have hope, have hope. With compassion as my shield and faith down to my marrow, I will walk the pollen path even when it gets narrow. Yeah, yeah. Resurrect. Yes, you can bet that we've seen a single mama raising children on the res. We've seen domestic violence tear apart what we have left. We've seen the alcohol take it all and leave us dead. We've seen the children take their lives when they can't take the dread anymore. Yeah, they can't take the dread anymore. Oh, no, I can't take the dread anymore. 'Cause I won't take the dread anymore. Yes, it's a war, but we've seen it all before, and now we know we can change it, 'cause that's why we were born. We know we are the ones that we have been waiting for. Yes, we are the ones that Grandma has been praying for. So rise up, all you warriors of love, all you answers to the prayers of our ancestors from above. I can feel it in my heart. Can you feel it in your blood? I can hear the seventh fire calling us to wake up. Yeah, all nations rise. Rise up, 'cause now's your time. No tienes que esconderte más, porque ahorita es nuestro tiempo. This next verse is in Spanish to honor all the indigenous relatives south of an imaginary border that divides a continent that was once very much connected. Mujer indígena, Tú eres tan sagrada y traigas medicina de tu suelo todavía. A pesar del abuso de tu cuerpo y tu tierra, yo respeto tus ritos, tus danzas, tus padres, hombre indígena. Tú eres honorable y yo veo la fuerza que todavía sobrevive a pesar del abuso de tu raza venerable. Yo respeto tus ritos, tus danzas, tus padres, guerreros del amor y guerreros de la paz. Sí, no vamos a escondernos más. We are warriors of love. We are warriors of peace. And we will not hide ourselves anymore. All nations rise, rise up, 'cause now's your time. We don't have to hide anymore, 'cause now's our time, yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Rise up, rise up. All nations rise. Woo! There's just a quick epilogue to that song, and I'll say it real quick because I know we're out of time. But I just want to say that they say that that history is written by the victor, right? But how can there be a victor if the war is not over? We are still here. We're still fighting each and every day, and we're grateful to have new allies such as yourselves. And we know that this time it's not about cowboys versus Indians. This time it's all the beautiful races of humanity together on the same side. And this time we're fighting fear. We're fighting to replace our fear with love. And we know that this time bullets and arrows and cannonballs aren't going to save us, but that this time the only weapons we have and the only weapons we need are the weapons of truth and faith and compassion. So thank you for fighting with me in this battle, and I love all of you so much. Have a beautiful day.